Hello, my name is Dr. Ann Taylor, and today we're going to talk a little bit about what is HRV biofeedback, and more importantly, why should you care? So let's break it down. Many people have heard of the term biofeedback, and it's a technique. There are several different types, but in general, it's a technique used to gain awareness of the interaction between your mind and your body. And HRV stands for heart rate variability. And so in this case, we're going to be talking about heart rate variability biofeedback. So what is HRV? To break it down a little bit further. Some people may have heard of it back with fetal monitoring back in the 1960s when it was first introduced as a indicator of stress. Now, in the case here, if a baby was in trouble, often the mother would get hooked up to a fetal monitor, which measured HRV of the baby. And then in later decades, it was also used in heart disease and now is known as a predictor of death from multiple causes. So we'll get to some research articles in just a moment. But so that is a little bit about heart rate variability. Now, this nice sine wave graph that you're looking at, and don't worry, there's not going to be too much math I know a lot of people are adverse to that. Heart rate variability is, as the name says, it's the variation in heart rate. So whether I'm sitting like this or walking, it's not about going outside and running and getting your heart rate up. There's a natural variation to your heart rate even as you're sitting. So as you inhale, your heart rate should increase slowly and gradually, which would be the upward part of the curve. And as you exhale, your heart rate, if you're healthy, should decrease at a smooth rate. So on the inhale, your heart is increasing, and on the exhale, your heart rate is decreasing. Now, this is imperceptible to just about everybody. So the top picture shows what our heart rhythm, again, this is not an EKG, what our heart rhythm looks like if we're under stress, anxiety, or depressed. There's a jagged line. It's not that nice smooth line like you see on the bottom graph. And so heart rate variability biofeedback helps us adjust our heart's rhythm. So in heart rate variability, the goal is to have our heart rhythm match that lower graph where it's nice and smooth instead of that jagged graph on top. So why practice HRV biofeedback? In fact, you may have never heard of it. Most people haven't, and even your doctor may not have heard of it. But upon the research I've done, the evidence is very strong. This is standard Western medical journals. This is not something that's tangential. So, for example, we just read the headlines here. We don't need to read the whole articles, but I have the sources should you wish to do so, by all means. So short-term heart rate variability strongly predicts sudden cardiac death in chronic heart failure patients. Another article in circulation, the title, as you can read, Low Heart Rate Variability in a 2-minute rhythm strip, and so that would be short-term, like we're going to be doing, predicts risk of coronary heart disease and mortality from several causes. So I think that this is an extremely important biomarker to know about, and it's coming into the mainstream. It's like everything else, it just takes a little time for it to infiltrate down to become a household word. And so the American Heart Association, as our final, why should I care about this? They stated back in 2000s, that's almost 20 years ago now. In conclusion, a population-based study of middle-aged men and women, high heart rate, and especially low heart rate variability were predictive of increased mortality rate. And they conclude it may be hypothesized that low HRV is an indicator of poor general health. So stress over time, actually stress in the moment, will reduce your heart rate variability. In fact, most people are walking around with very low heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is a dynamic window into the autonomic nervous system. So think of autonomic nervous system as automatic, or your things that are happening on autopilot. You don't have to think about breathing when you're sleeping. You don't have to consciously digest your food. And you don't have to raise and lower your blood pressure. That's what the autonomic system does for you. And there are two components, and I'm not going to go deeply into this, but it's important to know that there's two branches to this. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, or freeze response. You know, if you're chased by a tiger, that's not likely anymore, but that's the example sometimes people use. Same thing if your boss is yelling at you, or you're afraid you're going to be laid off. You know, those types of things cause a stress response. Or maybe your parent is aging and failing. Maybe just day to day, everything, somebody cuts you off. We're going to be in that sympathetic overdrive, as I call it. Now, the parasympathetic is the more rest and digest, and that is getting squelched down most of the time. So when you hear people talk about relaxation techniques to raise your HRV, that's important, but that's not where we're going to stop, because it's possible to go right through the optimal zones. So I'm going to use an example to make this clear kind of in a fun way. So the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks wanders into this house and, you know, the story begins. But for our purposes, let's look at Papa Bear as the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, of the autonomic nervous system. And this is not gender-based in any way, but they're universal principles. So Papa Bear is powerful, he's masculine, he's going to protect. So think about Papa Bear as the sympathetic nervous system. It is the more active component. It is protective. It's the fight, the flight, or the freeze. And again, this is not based on gender in any way. These are universal archetypal principles. So the Papa Bear is the stress component, and whereas the Mama Bear is the rest and digest, the relaxation. But what happens with Goldilocks? She tries Papa Bear's porridge. It's too hot. That's the masculine principle, the sympathetic. It's heated, it's hot. Mama Bear's is too cold. And so that's the rest and digest, the cooling, the calming. And Goldilocks finds another bowl that is just right. It's halfway between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, between Mama Bears and Papa Bears, between the hot and the cold. It's just right. Going back to this graph again, on the top graph, that's going to represent either Mama Bear or Papa Bear. So you can do relaxation techniques until the cows come home. You might pass right through that sweet spot or the zone of coherence. Let's just call it the zone of performance for now. So when Goldilocks finds the porridge that's just right, and also she then goes upstairs and she tries the Papa Bear's bed, it's too hard. And she goes over to the Mama Bear's bed and it's too squishy. She goes over to the Baby Bear's bed and it's just right. So this lower graph is the just right. It's the beautiful, delicate balance between these two forces. So that may be kind of an interesting way to think about it in non-technical terms. The sweet spot of heart rate variability, the pattern on the lower portion, is called heart coherence. Now, we'll be talking a lot about that more in courses or blogs. Heart coherence is a term that was originally coined by the HeartMath group. And the yogis knew about heart rhythm for years, I mean, millennia, actually, thousands of years. And Yogi Bhajan said that every beat of your heart is the rhythm of your soul. And the voice of your soul is your breath. And that's one of the first ways we learn to control and practice heart rate variability, biofeedback. So with breath work, that's one example of getting into the just right space. So without needing to know any science or math, companies such as HeartMath, that's the product I use. There are other products out there. Just find one you're comfortable with. The idea is to go from the red zone, so that's either Papa Bear mode or Mama Bear mode. And then as you get closer, there'll be a blue zone. And then the green zone is the just right. That's where Goldilocks likes it. That's where the heart coherence happens. And so heart rate variability is practiced by using an ear sensor. Sometimes people use finger sensors, and clipping it onto your earlobe. There's Bluetooth ones as well. And you hook it up either to your iPad, iPhone, Android device, and you begin to practice. So again, you're looking to go from the red to the blue to the green. So just another look at heart rate variability, biofeedback. The green is the healing zone, and it's high heart coherence. Again, as we go deeper into how to relieve stress naturally, you'll learn more about that. So what brings down our heart rate variability and our heart coherence? So stress, anxiety, depression, even poor diet and high blood pressure will act. And things that are outside of your control are environmental stressors. That could be something like a sunspot hitting the earth, a magnetic storm, or your age. Our biology may not at that point meet our chronology. And I love what Joseph Campbell said. And this, if to sum up the whole deal about heart coherence and heart rate variability, he says the goal of life is to make your heartbeat match the beat of the universe, to match your nature with nature. So when you are in the Goldilocks mode and that sine wave is happening nice and regularly, that is indeed matching nature. But we'll get into that in other segments. Thank you. Interesting. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.